That night, Suling's words cut deeper than I ever imagined. She wasn't just talking, she was confessing, unraveling years of hidden truths in a single breath. As the flames danced in the darkness, I realized the fire wasn't just outside, it was in us, burning away the last remnants of what we once were. I thought I knew her, but in that moment, I saw the stranger she had become, and the monster she was about to unleash. Discoveries causing new directions. It was after dinner when Suling quietly asked to talk to me in private. Suling's black hair framed her face, softly resting on her shoulders. Like many who had moved to America, her appearance radiated a unique beauty shaped by her experiences. Her light blue eyes, always expressive, reflected her true feelings about me, revealing much of her inner world. The warmth of her smile was inviting. At 5'7", she was certainly striking. She moved with a grace that showcased her upbringing, and despite the cultural differences she faced in America, her elegance shone through. The changes in her diet and environment had made her resilience apparent. She had grown stronger in ways that reflected a rich life experience. Her voice retained a gentle quality that could draw people in, yet she maintained a cautious distance, having learned to trust only those who proved themselves worthy over time. Building a connection had taken effort. Even in childhood, it had taken me months to understand her fully. In our early encounters, she often spoke in a way that protected her deeper feelings. It was part of her defense mechanism, a way to shield herself from vulnerability until trust was established. There was no doubt that she had transformed remarkably over the years. Suling possessed a beauty that set her apart, one that would have easily attracted others if her journey had been more conventional. The last heartfelt conversation we shared occurred on a night marked by sorrow. She confided that her family was being forced to leave China, deemed undesirables by the government. This news left us both heavy-hearted, for we understood the gravity of her situation. She longed to remain by my side, and the strength of our emotional bond became clear in that moment. Before the evening ended, I learned how deeply she viewed our connection. She envisioned a life filled with shared hopes and dreams. Despite our youth and the complexities of life, I reassured her that I would find my way to her, believing in the strength of our bond. As we walked together towards the edge of the plateau, we paused to watch the dance of the flames come alive against the backdrop of the sunset behind the mountain in the west. Our frames were so close together that they felt intertwined. I sensed that she was trying to find the words she needed to express to me. Suling was surprised by how quickly the sunset transformed the valley as the sun dipped behind the mountain. Darkness enveloped the landscape swiftly as the last traces of sunlight faded away, giving way to the vibrant dance of flames below. It was as if the world was changing right before our eyes. We were fortunate to share a moment of silence, absorbing the beauty of the flickering flames that grew brighter as darkness settled around us. The glow of the light reflected against the deepening shadows of the land. Suling took my hand, holding it tightly, as if waiting for the perfect moment to speak. It felt like her hand was right where it was meant to be. I heard her softly remark, "It's truly beautiful." Between us blossomed a sense of contentment and peace that had always been present as we grew up together. It reminded me that the feelings, desires, and emotions we shared in our youth were still alive. I began to anticipate what was yet to come. Since we were young, the closeness between us created an unbreakable bond. It made me realize that any fracture in this connection would leave us incomplete. This moment served as a gentle reminder of our significance to each other, both then and now. A slight breeze swept across the open space, making the patterns of light dance with a newfound vibrancy. A couple of small whirlwinds stirred through the flames, producing a unique display of light across the land. "I could watch this for hours," I said. "Each night seems to bring its own rhythm. It has a wonderful way of clearing my thoughts." "Your adopted father, the master," Suling responded, "is a thinker who seeks logic in everything. He believes that there must be structure, balance, and purpose. I see a lot of him in you. Like him, you are someone who appreciates solitude in your reasoning." "He is indeed wise," I replied. His insights allowed him to anticipate events before they unfolded and to take steps to ensure that they aligned with his life's vision. "Dirk, Mom and Dad mentioned they spoke with Alana and you about me," Suling said. "I wish they hadn't, as it seems they misunderstood the situation. Given the paths we've taken, it's been difficult for them to grasp my feelings." "I understand. After all, they missed many of your formative years," I replied, eager to hear more. "Their thoughts are based on what you told them, what they heard, and what they believe. I have wondered if they discerned what you were saying or just heard. It sounds like you have not been completely honest with yourself or them." "Dirk, let me be completely honest," Suling said softly. "Ni yong yuan shi wo wei yi de yi ge," which means you will always be my only one in Chinese. I have always cared for you and always will. When she said that, I began to see what was about to happen. Suling was going to use this moment to try to convince herself that her feelings were real. "From the first time you heard me weeping as I hid beside the pond behind the temple," Suling said, "I knew that you had been sent to me to guide me through the difficult years. You were a presence that came in answer to my prayers. You are and always will be my support. I can see many admirable qualities in you because you have been the foundation on which I built my life. You were and still are the complete opposite of my cousin Louis Wei," Suling continued. "In you, I saw all that was good, while with Louis Wei I faced challenges daily. You taught me to resist and overcome by separating myself mentally from the situation. You gave me strength when I had none. You have always walked with a maturity that was beyond your years," Suling said. "It took my coming to America to understand how wise you actually are. Mom and Dad believe it is because you keep the traditions of the old world, and it reflects in everything you do. They fail to understand that, like your adopted father, you see our reality with a different perspective than most." "You speak with wisdom, little sister," I said. "I did not fully understand it either until Alana came into my life. Her parents have always said she walks to the rhythm of her own drum. She taught me that what I am as a man is quite unique. Until she came into my life, I thought it was something everyone had. She, beside you, is the only person who accepted me as I am. Every day we share things with each other. These things naturally draw us in further. In ways it seems we can communicate without speaking. Alana's approach to people can seem a bit direct to those who don't understand her," Suling said, "just as straightforward as you used to be. Learning to be more tactful has mellowed you out. At first, until I got to know and understand you, I felt uncertain because your insights and views of things were so different from what I knew to be social norms. That is how uniquely you have always walked. Together, the two of you bring out a softer side in each other. I feel that the two of you complement one another." "That explains why her parents feel that she has changed," I said. "Thank you for pointing that out. The master, my adopted father, always believed that when you found your true soulmate, you would grow as a person, walking in harmony together." "I tried to explain to my parents that it was your qualities I admired," Suling said. "That was what I sought in the man with whom I would build a future. I guess they didn't understand. They believe I should already be settled with someone from our culture, with children of my own. So when they spoke to me and Alana, they were taking a leap of faith," I said, "hoping that my respect for traditions would guide me toward their wishes of envisioning a family with you." "It became complicated due to my conversations with Alana," Suling admitted. "I didn't communicate my thoughts clearly. I may have assumed too much, especially since she didn't fully understand our native language. I hope you'll forgive me for any confusion that caused." "A little advice," I said. "Remember to emphasize the qualities you see in me. That one word carries a lot of meaning and helps avoid misunderstandings." "Dirk," Suling continued, "if I can't find that man soon, it would be easy for me to agree to my parents' wishes. After all, that was our original plan. I would cherish the opportunity to raise a family. Until we left for America, that was my lifelong dream." Suling's honesty touched me, showcasing the depth of her feelings. It reminded me of my adopted father, who had shared his wisdom about our connection. Suling is naturally gentle. Your influence allows her to find balance in her approach to life, enabling her to grow beyond her previous limitations. You are not just her brother in spirit, but the one destined to be her partner. Her affection for you is profound. She would go to great lengths for you. I see this in you too, as you naturally strive to support her. You are so intertwined that you are part of each other's very essence. In another time, you would have held a prominent position, and she would have stood by your side. When looking for a lasting connection, be open to various experiences, I advised. I often found it challenging to keep my thoughts to myself when I observed others making choices perhaps not grounded in understanding. Do you remember the time we saw the two doves? Suling asked. I wanted to rush in, but you stopped me because you recognized their behavior as a natural part of life. As you said, one must see things through the eyes of others and respect their lives as they are. We were still quite young then. It seems like a lifetime ago, I said. Now, I would suggest we try to maintain the balance of things. Suling looked at me as if she were gaining a new understanding. After a few moments of silence, watching the flickering light of the flames reflecting on the flats below, she spoke. That was Satan's first sin. He disrupted the balance that God had created, Suling said. Adam and Eve at that time shared a profound understanding with all living things. And since that time, everyone has been searching for what God took away when he withdrew his blessing from the earth, I added, agreeing with her. Many do not realize that only God can restore what we have lost. It's our daily actions that demonstrate how unworthy we are of it. Seeing a smile on my face, Suling asked, what thought inspired that reflection? I never understood until now that when God created Adam and Eve, he made them as partners who would start a family. Today, that notion may seem inappropriate by modern standards. It reveals how little we grasp about God's original purpose. Imagine if that ever became public knowledge. It would pose quite a challenge for those who claim to be religious scholars, Suling said. They would have to reconsider everything they believe. Suling, would you do anything that might bring harm to any member of your family? I inquired, knowing the answer would help define what love truly is. There is an inherent instinct to protect our family from the very beginning, Suling replied. In a way, we are one. It creates a harmony that I never recognized before. Do you believe humanity understands this? No, because they won't truly comprehend that until we find a way to restore balance to all things in life. All efforts to improve the world as a collective would be in vain, I said. For those of us who understand, we can only strive to bring balance to the lives of those we care about. Suling moved closer, and I began to sense that there was more happening at that moment than I had initially perceived. Every living being carries the same essence of life within them, I clarified. Without it, our existence would cease. Few appreciate the significance of this vitality. Dirk, every man who shows interest in me is inevitably compared to you and falls short, Suling admitted honestly. You have always set standards that far exceed those of others. At that moment, a look of unconditional love crossed Suling's face. I knew at that moment that from now on I would always have to use discernment with her. Her love for me was as pure as the freshly fallen snow on the mountain. Everything I said from that point on would have to be done with protecting my relationship with her. The Master, my adopted father, had stressed that in our journey through life, the greatest challenge was to navigate it without causing harm. I began to see his words in a new light. Love was meant to be expressed, encouraged, nurtured, and protected when given freely from one to another. Suling, although her words conveyed one sentiment, seemed to have deeper thoughts that her actions and emotions revealed. The Master had made it clear that what we heard, what we listened to, and believed could be influenced by our perceptions. It was through observing one's long-term conduct and lifestyle that the truth became evident. How one engaged with others showed the real self hidden within. Alana was right. For most of my life, Suling had stood by me. She longed for a deeper commitment, which she would patiently wait for. Publicly, she wouldn't express this longing, as it was a private burden she carried. It raised questions within me that I knew would require weeks of contemplation to sort out. I locked eyes with Suling, her gaze revealing much. I could sense that mine reflected the same, causing her to blush. For a moment, she looked down, as if she didn't want me to see her vulnerability. I felt she was beginning to understand my perspective. Suling looked at me in a way that conveyed her strong feelings for me. I was trying to move past my dreams for us, Suling admitted honestly. Then the night of the prom only strengthened those feelings. By your reaction, I realize I have not succeeded in hiding them. Alana mentioned I could try, but it seems I proved her right. It's further complicated because Fen has had feelings for Alana for quite some time. Does Alana know how Fen feels? I asked. Not that I'm aware of, Suling replied. Fen has been busy researching the role of a consort. She believes you haven't arranged your home the way she thinks is ideal, as certain historical texts suggest that many who shared close bonds often did so discreetly. With the truth now revealed, I understood the necessity of handling my relationships with both women delicately. Suling and Fen were expecting relationships based on what they were learning, not on what they knew. Across the valley where the iron ore is being mined is where we will be making large volumes of scotch in the space that is being created. They are mining 24 hours a day to speed up the process, I said, trying to change the direction of our chat. I will begin working shortly on the office building and equipment building we will need, along with a few spaces for a residential living component for when that company is established. Towards the current office building, we are building a new subdivision, I said. David is in discussion with the county about building a small 8-classroom school. We want a grocery store, a gas station, and all things that are needed in a small community. We figure by the time it is all set up, we will have a population of about 3,000. David is requesting that when the school is complete, you be put in as its principal. Suling had a smile on her face that seemed like it was a mile wide. I guess my words conveyed that I wanted her in the long term close to me. I guess Alana has explained to you that nothing will be decided until after we have wed, I said. When this all first came up, we agreed to firmly establish our relationship first. Yes, and why? We are already discussing how our relationship as sister wives might work out if you decided it was in your heart to accept it. With you and I being older, Alana and I agreed that if what we both want comes to be, it will be an equal relationship between us three, Suling said. As Alana explained, there are a few things that you have to work out for yourself before anything can be decided. In Zen teaching, one of our greatest quests is finding the way to walk through life doing no harm, I said. Alana, because she is and always will be the love of my life, will have a say in everything I do. She wants to push our marriage up and has begun applying pressure on her parents. Alana is more than ready to assume the position of being one of your partners in the walk of life and is already talking about carrying your firstborn. Fen says it's all she talks about when they are at school, Suling said. I told her that I thought that you both should wait until the truth of what was behind your parents' death came out. I am well aware of that, I said. Alana has been in a rush to push life since we have completed building the house. I told her father that he should not give in to her wants until the danger that has to come has been confronted. With that said, Suling turned towards me. Moving closer, she wrapped her arms around me in the darkness, conveying support and warmth. Our connection deepened, and the moment felt significant, leading to a series of tender moments that expressed our growing bond. Suling's gentle presence conveyed emotions that words alone could not express. I noticed a depth in her eyes that spoke of joy and connection, reaffirming my thoughts. After our time together, I saw the happiness in her demeanor, a reflection of how our connection had strengthened her beliefs. In your mind, you may still be uncertain about your path. Alana and I feel strongly about our bond as sister wives. The closeness we've experienced, the unspoken response, and the rhythm of your heart reveal another side of your feelings. Your heart and mind desire this connection, just as I do, Suling expressed with hope. The tenderness you showed indicates the strength of your emotions. Now that we understand that a major part of your internal struggle has been resolved, it will be easier to address the rest. I watched as she walked back into the house, her confidence evident. Both Alana and she shared a common perspective, presenting a challenge for me in the days ahead. My thoughts drifted back to a lesson I had learned from my mentor about observing nature. Watch the female, he had instructed, and her approach to the male. We had spent hours observing the two mountain goats, focusing on her movements and how her presence influenced him. It took time for him to yield to her desires. We respond to the influence of women much like the male goat does, my mentor explained. The female uses her presence and traits to guide the male toward her intentions. There is nothing in life that can compare to love, determination, will, and patience, he said. A woman's love can empower her partner, creating a dynamic that is profound. However, love is delicate and unique to each individual. It cannot be easily defined. I stood there, watching the flames flicker in the distance, pondering the complexities of life. With our new home established, I needed to focus on uncovering the truths about my parents and their journeys. The lessons from my mentor were beginning to resonate with my experiences with Suling and Alana. Our discussion provided me with fresh insights into the meaning of sibling-like partnerships, prompting a reevaluation of my understanding of relationships. I sensed a change on the horizon, one that promised to be transformative. It would be a game played by humans to protect themselves from me discovering the unknown. I just knew I would need all the focus, willpower, and determination to survive through to the end. The master had explained to me on the way to the American embassy during our last few hours together that he was taking me there because he felt that the Chinese government was moving in. When I questioned why he felt that way, he elaborated. Over the last few weeks, the temple has been watched. Some of our brothers have noticed people attempting to access areas they should not. There have been signs of intrusion, yet everything seemed undisturbed. Their scent is notable. It's evident that someone experienced is involved. They were working their way into restricted areas trying to find you. What does that all mean? I asked, still not seeing the full picture. The Chinese government plays a long game, he replied. They can take the smallest detail and over time turn it into an advantage. They may have coerced one of the new brothers by using their family's history to reveal that there is someone living with us who has kept a secret. That would explain it all, I said. It also implies that they don't know who but want to find out, which explains why we are doing this. In life, the simplest answer is usually the correct one, my adopted father said, although most people would never admit it. I know that when we arrive at our destination, our journey together will come to an end. Remember always that I carry you with me in all I do. Having you come into my life made me a better man. I will miss you dearly like a father who has lost a son. A tear rolled down my cheek as I remembered our last moments. It was the only time I had ever seen emotion reflected in his eyes. His last words to me had said it all. Wo I ni er zi were his final words to me. Then he was gone. Those simple words conveyed everything because it was the first time he had ever expressed such love for me. My adopted father had no choice but to leave me so that I could have the protection of the American government in front of me. I must have been standing there for quite a while because Alana, noticing my distraction, had put on a sweater and walked out to me. I was oblivious to how much it had cooled. I was starting to get worried about my future husband, Alana said. Has something got you upset? Perhaps it was finding out how my future sister-in-law feels. After Suling left my side, I said, I was deep in thought, remembering a few things that my adopted father and I had shared. In a way, my mind was preparing me for what is about to come. When you get home, send me a text to remind me to text you my parents' full names along with her maiden name. We need to put the past behind us before we move forward. What about Suling's feelings? Alana asked. I know her feelings about me have not changed since we grew up together, I said. I had hoped that time and distance might soften them, but I am afraid they have only become stronger. She would wait forever to be by my side without a word of complaint. I will have to figure out what is best for everyone moving ahead. Alana leaned against me and said, You share a bond with her, and it's clear that she cares for you deeply. Like me, she hopes for a future together. The question you need to ask yourself is whether you are prepared to change a life in order to uphold what you believe is right. I gazed across the flats towards the other side of the valley when Alana took my hand and said, Just across the mountain would be a perfect place to build a home for a future family. Suling is planning to have a family of her own. You and Suling seem to have it all mapped out, I noted. Suling just shared the history of our society and how it was formed, Alana said. That truth alone should prompt a lot of reflection, as it suggests that perspectives can evolve over time. Yes, I understand, I replied. I see her logic, and it troubles me because it forces me to reconsider my stance on this matter. Legally, she can't marry you, Alana explained. But in her heart, she feels she already has. That is why she has begun the process of changing her last name. She, like me, values the commitment she carries and plans to remain steadfast until the time comes for you to honor that commitment. Within 2 weeks, Alana had gathered all the background material available online. One company stood out, associated with my grandfather, Archibald Raoul Campbell. It was part of the complete military supply system. He was a key figure at a firm under contract with the American government, known for helping develop the stealth airplane. My grandfather, whom I'd never met, was on the board of directors. I searched for his name and found a substantial bibliography about him. I learned he had 3 sons, 2 of whom lived in Boston. He served on the boards of several companies connected to the military. 2 things stood out: his political affiliations and his school connections, although it appeared he had never served in the armed forces. While my parents' deaths were mentioned, the circumstances remained unclear. I questioned whether my grandfather, given my birth in China, was aware of my existence. I discovered a firm that had innovated a way to turn microchips into a compact format compatible with modern computers. It had cost $400. Once opened, it froze because I did not have the correct password. Suling's father had mentioned in our last meeting that the key I was looking for would be found on the ring. I examined it as I always did, but saw nothing but the strange pattern that it had. The design seemed perplexing. As Alana and I looked at it together, we both struggled to make sense of it, the black pattern showing no discernible rhythm or logic. I was frustrated that I couldn't unlock its mystery. Even Alana's parents, after closely examining it, couldn't decipher the pattern. The more we pondered over it, the more frustrating it became, as we could find no clue or direction. The breakthrough came a couple of weeks later while I was helping her father install a new weather vane on one of his barns. He had found it in a small antique shop while waiting for his truck to be loaded with supplies. It was the most unusual piece I had ever encountered. Its design appeared upside down or sideways to most. When I inquired about it, he explained that it was crafted as a conversation piece, which he appreciated. That was when inspiration struck. After Sunday dinner, I asked, "Alana, can you get me a couple of pieces of scrap paper and a pencil?" She returned in a couple of minutes, watching as I removed the ring from my finger and began writing down the individual Chinese characters I could discern from its interior and exterior. He had added lines where spaces would have been, forming a continuous line of Chinese letters. When you write in Chinese, you write from top to bottom, starting on the left side and moving to the right, I said. Unlike English, which runs side to side, Chinese characters are arranged vertically, completing the circle on the ring. Alana observed intently as I transcribed the characters. The only thing missing were the markings that defined these letters. I then translated the Chinese characters into the English alphabet, arranging them until the resulting words made sense. After about 20 minutes of working with the letters, I figured it out. The words written on the ring read, Zi Shen De Ming Zi. Alana's eyes lit up in excitement. "What does it say?" she asked. "God's name in Chinese," I replied. "Could it be that simple?" Alana wondered. "Depends on the language it was written in," I responded. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Was it designed in Chinese, English, Hebrew, or Greek?" I explained. "And which name of God was used? Was it I am, Jehovah, Adonai, or others?" God is known by many names throughout the Bible and the history of mankind. "It sounds like it is a puzzle within a puzzle," Alana said. "Why would he do that?" "Because the odds were that most in the Chinese government would not have exact knowledge of what they were trying to erase," I said. "And if they did, without knowing the Bible's history and its relationship with humanity, their understanding would be limited." I found myself reflecting deeply on my father's motivations. For the first time, I was beginning to appreciate the brilliance of his actions. His reasoning was reminiscent of a logical mind, transforming something straightforward into a complex challenge, one that required me to think critically and explore his thought process. Alana must have noticed the emotion in my eyes because she said, "You have just come to understand a father you never had a chance to know in a new way. Do you think he knew you would be the one to unveil his truths?" It took me 3 weekends to decipher the pattern. By the time I pieced it all together, I had developed a newfound respect for the man I scarcely remembered. I learned through research that Hebrew is read from right to left. Most of God's names were either too short or too long for the context. I also recalled that ancient Hebrew writings traditionally lacked vowels. God's name consisted of 4 letters in Hebrew, Y-A-W-O. I understood that was too brief, so I needed to ascertain the pronunciation. I had to determine whether it was modern or traditional Hebrew. It turned out the traditional pronunciation was Yud-He-Wah-He. That simple revelation clarified much, but my initial entry had been incorrect. When I input my findings as they would be read in Hebrew, something remarkable happened. Excited, I quickly grabbed my laptop and headed over to the Connors' residence, somewhat oblivious to the late hour. They were understandably surprised until I shared my discovery. After Bonnie brewed coffee for us, Ian said, "Okay, open it up, and let's see what we have." "Alana, turn on the printer," Bonnie instructed. "It's an Epson Workforce 2760. The Wi-Fi password is 80326851470. The file opened as soon as I entered the English pronunciation of God's name as it would be read in Hebrew. To our astonishment, it contained 64 pages. I printed out 2 copies. The document was comprehensive and well organized. It illustrated how the relationship between Gungwu Wang and my grandfather had begun and evolved. They had met during their university years. Wang had been born in 1942 and was slightly older than my grandfather. We discovered that in the last decade of my father's life, he had been building a case that could implicate his father for espionage. Wang and my grandfather's relationship had been lifelong. I learned that most of my grandfather's money had been earned through his investments in China. Every 2 years, it was his routine to travel back to China. The only time that did not occur was when my parents were engaged in community service in China. During that time, he traveled to North Korea. Many were puzzled by this, but I understood the historical context between those 2 countries. Many who disappeared from Chinese society ended up in North Korea's work colonies. My grandfather only went there to assist those individuals when they first arrived. As we reviewed the documentation, a clear picture of their long-term relationship emerged. It became evident why my grandfather was a member of the American Communist Party and had been accused of passing secrets to the Chinese government. A list of his contacts in America and China spanned over 2 pages. My father's father was referred to as the Ark in many of the documents that detailed secret meetings and financial transactions. The pieces of the puzzle started to come together. "It looks like your father believed that his own father had brought trouble upon him," Ian said, "because he saw his son as a potential threat. This new information confirmed everything my adoptive father and I had suspected. The attack on the community was a smokescreen to obscure their true agenda. My parents' deaths were not a legal issue, but rather actions taken to safeguard their asset, my grandfather." At that moment, Alana pulled up Wikipedia and discovered that Gungwu Wang was a current member of the National Congress and had been since 2017. It also says that he is the head of China's development and governance, along with references for the information, Alana noted. "Do you know what that department essentially does?" "It sets policy and oversees the information structure of the government," I explained. "At least it did until I left China." Before closing my laptop, I transferred the file to 3 other storage devices and then reformatted it. "Dirk, do you want me to place one of the devices and a copy of the information in our safe for protection?" Ian asked. "That might be a good idea," I replied. "The master copy will go into the safety deposit box at the bank on Monday." "You'll need to turn the information over to the authorities," Bonnie mentioned. "It's going to require a thorough explanation." "That's the least of my concerns," I said. "As Lachey once remarked to me, it's often who you think of as a brother or dear friend that can turn against you. The master, my adopted father, taught me that sometimes small events from the past can create situations that others may exploit." "Are you saying that you can't just turn it over to the local FBI?" Alana asked. "If the news is correct, there have been foreign agents working with politicians for years," I explained. "It's safe to assume that they might have influence in various government departments. The second question we need to consider is that if everyone is pointing fingers at one country, we should ask who they are protecting and why." The expressions on Alana's parents' faces indicated they were starting to grasp the seriousness of the situation I was facing. "Do you really think it is that severe in our society?" Ian asked. "It doesn't matter what I think," I replied. I have to act as if I believe it is true because there are forces that will do everything they can to suppress this information. It seems clear that my parents were silenced to protect my grandfather's identity. So, how do you plan to deal with it? Bonnie inquired. I have an annual meeting with the EPA and the governor coming up, I said. I will use their guidance as my compass. Why those two? Ian asked. They have earned my trust, I answered, just as I have earned theirs. Dafadfad naditha dulit, said Alana in Gaelic, meaning may the gods go with you. Her words were reassuring. Mom and Dad Connors were not surprised when I embraced her in support. Our daughter hopes you resolve this quickly, Ian said with a light-hearted chuckle. We have told her that we wouldn't agree to moving up the date of your marriage unless this is resolved. Looking into my future wife's eyes, I noticed her apprehension, so I reassured her, if it comes to life-altering decisions, I will do whatever it takes to protect you. Is Tusa Macdathar, Alana said in Gaelic, which means you are your father's son. You will act according to your understanding of right and wrong. In that moment, I realized that despite my limited time with him, I was my father's son, unwilling to accept wrongdoing for any perceived greater good. For most of the next week, I was unavailable to anyone, reflecting on my adopted father's teachings. When faced with challenges that tested the character of those around him, he would retreat to work through his thoughts. Thursday night, I called Alana. I've been so worried, Alana said. You haven't contacted me or answered my calls and texts all week. Why? I needed to mentally prepare for what lies ahead by sorting through everything in my mind, I explained. I want to be ready for all possibilities and outcomes. That was when it struck her because Alana said, you sense danger and betrayal. You fear the worst because of what was done to your parents. Talk to Fen, I said, in private, and let her know what's going on. I need her to keep a close eye on her brother's actions moving forward. She should also share this with Suling in a similar manner this weekend. I can do that, but why? Alana replied. I've spent the last few days searching for the weakest link, I said. I've concluded that it's the individual who operates out of Washington, D.C. On Monday, I will make my opening move to see where it leads. How do you plan to do that without revealing any details? Alana asked. By planting a thought that will prompt someone to reach a conclusion, I replied. That will require them to follow up. On Friday, China time, I called the embassy that had brought me home. 2 of the 3 security team members who had looked after me were still assigned to the area. Once I had identified myself, I requested they call me back on a secured line. It took me about half an hour to share what I had learned so far. When they asked how I was handling the information, I told them I had made 3 copies, all stored in secure locations. I explained what I needed and why. After giving them my email address, I knew the game was on. They were not surprised by my revelations. I learned that they had suspected issues but lacked proof. The money my grandfather brought home from China had a well-documented trail that indicated it was made legally. They had believed the paper trail might have been counterfeited, but had not been able to validate that. When I provided the name of the person I expected would contact them, they suggested they would take a detailed look to see what they could discover. Monday morning, I called Chris Devereaux. One of EPA's upper management answered my call as soon as he was informed it was me. After confirming he had received all the latest information on our ongoing project, I got serious. Chris, I need you to inform the governor that after our official meeting, I will need a few minutes to seek both yours and his guidance on a serious matter, I said. What does it concern? Chris inquired. The circumstances surrounding my parents' deaths, I explained. I've learned the primary reason was not what I had been led to believe. Wow, how did that happen? Chris asked, his voice reflecting increased concern. I recently received some of my parents' belongings back from China, I explained, from the same embassy where my adopted father had taken me. I will be seeking advice from the governor and you on what steps to take before proceeding. As soon as we ended the conversation, I sensed that something did not feel right. I just did not know what or why. My mind went back to my adopted father, the master, who always said those who fear the truth coming to light will target the one who holds it out of animosity. That conversation arose after we had assisted a Christian man who was facing persecution from the state. The monks had sheltered him from the authorities until one of the brothers found him a freighter willing to take him on as a novice employee in the middle of the night. I texted Alana, asking her to conduct a background search on Chris Devereaux and email me the details. I then messaged her again, instructing her to call me as soon as possible and not to take any other action. "What's wrong?" Alana asked when she called. "I just remembered that Google has close ties with China and has imposed certain restrictions on users in their country at the request of the Chinese government," I explained. "China has had years to establish a backdoor into Google's system to mine data of potential value." "Oh my God," Alana replied. "They may already know someone is onto them. Bring the program with you tonight so we can reformat the computer and assign it a new identification. Tomorrow at school I will leave the laptop in the cafeteria." I arrived just as they were finishing dinner. Bonnie offered me a plate, but I informed her I had already eaten. Most people don't realize that while the internet became mainstream in the early 1990s, it had been around for many years prior. Consequently, with China always playing the long game, they managed to infiltrate anything that could provide them with an advantage. Every foreign company operating in China was aware that their systems were vulnerable and acted accordingly, though they often didn't know the extent. The news reported that the intellectual theft of data and systems cost the American economy billions each year, much of which could have been facilitated by the backdoors they created. Alana brought me the computer as I prepared to reformat it after we printed out the background information on Chris Devereaux, which she had gathered from Google and a social media search. I found no reasons for concern. There appeared to be no visible connections. "Wait a minute," Ian interjected after conducting a search on his own desk computer. "Squire Patton Boggs is a lobbying firm that has long represented the Chinese embassy in Washington. They have an employee named Carl Devereaux. Is he related to Chris?" "Yes, there's one listed. Why?" I asked after rereading the printed material. "It states he serves as a strategic advisor to clients in the U.S. and abroad, focusing on global business development. Carl Devereaux helped lead the effort to grant China the most favored trading nation status in the late 1990s. I looked at Ian with a new sense of urgency. He was also linked to the FBI's investigation into ZTE's violation of the sanctions on Iran. When it became public knowledge, he resigned, Ian added. It's also noted that ZTE has close ties to the United Front, which is a political influence arm of the Chinese Communist Party. With the laptop reformatted, I turned it back on and uploaded the program to give it a new identity. "It's crazy. I can't believe it's that easy to connect someone to the Chinese government," Alana said. "Dad, what gave you the idea of checking into lobbyists?" "Something Dirk had said when he figured out what his dad's ring said," Ian explained. "I started going through the lists of employees until I found one with the same last name." "Ian, run a Facebook search to see if we can tie them in as family members," Bonnie suggested. Using Google and Windows 10, it took about 10 minutes before he had pictures of both sides side by side on his screen. The family resemblance was clear. All four of us were not surprised when Facebook verified that they were brothers. "What do you think is going to happen next?" Alana asked. "Do you remember when we went into the restaurant to save Suling from Fenn's brother?" I asked. "Most of it. Why do you ask?" Alana replied, sounding puzzled. "Suling revealed that night that I was the Wooming," I said. "With how I confronted Fenn's brother, I'm sure he would remember." Alana's eyes widened as the information registered. It became clear how close they might be. "Oh my!" Alana exclaimed. "That's why I had to inform Fenn. Lachey believes he's involved with the Chinese Communist Party." The look on the Connors' faces will stay with me because they all seem to begin grasping how interconnected American society was, with individuals acting on behalf of other countries. "It also adds more context to why the Chinese government hunted me for so long," I said. "They might have believed I was key to finding the file my dad created that would expose the corruption within our own country." "I think we need to keep a closer eye on our daughter," Ian said. "Starting tomorrow until this is all finished, we will drive her to school." She had picked him up that Wednesday morning and had followed him as per her supervisor's orders, looking for the right moment to make contact. Her superiors believed that he alone would know what the Wooming was up to. The Zen master was known to be a strong-willed man with a fierce reputation for not backing down. It would take every ounce of training she had to outwit him. but she knew it had to be done. When it had been revealed that someone was living in the temple that did not belong, she had been on the team who was ordered to find out who. They had reached halfway into the very depths of the inner sanctum before their inside informer notified his contact that the individual had left. 3 days later, they learned that the one they had been searching for was at the U.S. Embassy, finally in safe hands. They did not know for sure if the Zen master had been the one that had ensured the safety of the unnamed individual, but it was their strongest lead. Based on new information that had come from above, suggesting the need for urgency, she had been ordered to investigate what he knew. The master was of average build and height, and if it weren't for his monk's attire, you might not have noticed him. Many who had challenged his leadership quickly discovered how adept he was in overcoming opposition. Even those agents with years of training were hesitant to confront him. In the temple, he was a man who commanded respect, as it was common for other monks to seek his guidance. He had already reached a level in his development that many monks spent their lives trying to achieve. In the only recorded video of him standing up against 6 so-called professionals in a demonstrative exercise, not one had been able to touch him. It was only by playing the video at half speed that you could see the movement blur he created. Yongling was aware he was being followed, but did not know why. Since his adopted son had been left at the U.S. Embassy, the Chinese authorities had allowed them to be, until that morning. He was going through the local market, checking out the vendors' wares, when he first noticed her, a familiar face from a long time ago. Once it was established that he was the reason for her presence there, he needed to understand why. He led her into a local park where he was now waiting. Having safely stored his purchase for a quick pickup later, he positioned himself to ensure he could gain the upper hand if necessary. As she passed through the semi-private area for the 3rd time, searching for what she had lost, he caught a whiff of her perfume and recognized her. Yongling reached out and gently drew her back against him, covering her mouth to prevent any sound. "Who are you, and what do you want?" he asked in Mandarin. As he held her, she reached into her pocket and retrieved her business card. The first thing he noted was that she was with the American consulate. He released her and listened intently. "Your son is in danger," she explained, then asked if he spoke English. "I speak 7 languages. English is one of them," Yongling replied. "Why do you think I am the right man?" "Wuming's real name is Dirk Campbell," the woman responded. "I'm Susan Wong. I was part of the security team that got him out of the country." Susan Wong observed closely to see if they had identified the right man. She watched to see if tears would fill Yongling's eyes. Instead, she saw a look of sorrow because he recognized the name she had given him was false. "Who and why are they coming after him?" the master inquired, not expecting a straightforward answer. "Scott contacted us on Friday. He found the file and successfully got in after deciphering the clue his father left for him," she explained. He mentioned that his father had proven his own father was selling government secrets to the Chinese authorities. The attack on the Christian community was a cover-up, so they could legally execute them under the guise of fighting terrorism. "The American government is nothing but a ship of fools," Yongling stated firmly. "For years they have been sending money to support the Christian community in my country while fully knowing that the government just seizes it all, believing it will buy votes back home." "They will be coming after him," Susan Wong continued. "We suspect they will try to draw him out using a female whose first name is Suling. Her father is known as Leche." Yongling raised his hand and employed a rarely used technique passed down by the Secret 6 masters to those chosen to carry on their legacy. Applying the Bak Mei technique, which is a highly refined and fast system, his hand moved with remarkable speed. To an untrained observer, it might seem like an act of force, but his approach left no marks. After ensuring her safety, he placed her gently in the underbrush. Using precise movements, he traced 6 points on her scalp and whispered, "Fawn Wang, when they find you, report back to those who sent you that I was not the one you were looking for. We spoke, but I had no knowledge of what you were implying. Go to Madame Wing's and offer your services as instructed." Madame Wing would ensure that the skills her latest recruit brought would be lucrative. She relished the opportunity to take down those in high positions. From the moment Fawn entered the establishment, she would be transformed, making it difficult to identify her. Once acclimated, she would be introduced to the influential officials who were her most profitable clients. Yongling had once again been compelled to use his knowledge to change the course of someone's life. He still had second thoughts about the first instance. This one he would not, because he had seen her for weeks trying to enter the temple just before he had taken his son to safety. Today he would go about his business as if nothing had happened, but come tomorrow when the American embassy unlocked their doors, they would find him waiting. It was time for the 6 masters to travel for the first time to America and to learn that their internal security was compromised. If Dirk was indeed facing trouble, he needed to get to him. Dirk would require the full teachings that were locked in his mind to guide him on the road ahead. It had been challenging to get the other 5 of the Secret 6 to accept his adopted son as the one to pass on the ways of the old. But when he explained the mental strength the child exhibited to overcome challenges, even they had been impressed. Thus, at the age of about 10, Dirk began learning what a true master could do when called upon. Most had to have experienced life before they were chosen. That's why certain guards had to be put in place to ensure the knowledge could not be misused as he grew up. The strength in him was remarkable, perhaps the strongest he had ever seen. Once every lesson had been fully learned, he would go to where Dirk was resting and influence his mind positively. What every master of the Bai Mei could do was make the impossible possible by bending the rules of physics when needed to create an advantage. Most of the special effects they used in martial arts movies were basic compared to what they could do. When Fawn Wang failed to report in at the appointed time, her supervisors became concerned. When she missed the second one, they grew anxious because losing contact with Gungwu Wang's granddaughter meant a major problem for those assigned to handle her. If she were not found soon, someone would intervene in the night, and those considered responsible would face serious consequences. At the start of the next day, it would be as if they never existed. Those who knew of their situation understood better than to ask, lest they face similar repercussions. Fawn Wang awoke in the brush, her mind foggy and her belongings missing. The last thing she remembered was being sent out on a routine assignment, but she could not recall the details. Slowly, as her mind cleared, things became evident. She had been victimized on her way to Madame Wing's to seek a position as a recruit. It must mean that significant changes were taking place in the higher levels of the government. Although certain activities had been illegal for years, Madame Wing's operations had been permitted to continue because they served a perceived greater good. The party utilized her as a means to address the challenges posed to the agenda that the United Front sought to implement. This made it easier to remove individuals who were problematic for their operations. Those deemed lower tier faced long prison sentences, while those in positions of power were sent to isolated prison work camps in North Korea, where it was believed few survived for more than 7 years. As Fawn Wang headed towards her assignment, she wondered whether her supervisors had orchestrated events to ensure her story would be appealing to Madame Wing. Madame Wing was taken aback when she entered her private office for a call and found a former schoolmate waiting for her. She was unaware that little Ling had become a Zen monk. "It's been a long time, my old friend," Wu Wing said. "What brings you here after all these years?" "Have you ever heard of the one they call the Wu Ming?" Wang Ling inquired. "Yes, the upper echelon was quite upset that he evaded capture," Wu Wing replied. "We lost several clients because of his escape. They sent an agent to speak with me about that issue," Wang revealed. "Unfortunately, she now believes I am uninformed." "Why should I be concerned?" Wu asked. "The agent now believes she has been tasked to operate undercover as a new recruit in your establishment," Wang stated. "With her skills, she will be a significant asset. She is expected to arrive within the next 24 hours. "Why has this happened to her?" Wu Wang asked, intrigued. "The Wu Ming is my adopted son, and the agent informed me they are pursuing him," Wang explained. "I am heading to America to support him." Wu Wang scrutinized her former classmate for a moment, weighing her response regarding his claims. "What is the agent's name, and why is it crucial that she not be discovered?" Wu Wang probed. Young Ling reached into his pocket and handed her an identification card. The name on the card was Fawn Wang. She recognized her as the granddaughter of a notably important figure. After reading it, she tore the card and discarded it. "You know that my staff must maintain a traditional appearance throughout their day," Wu Wing remarked. "This ensures that, should they choose to leave this life, Their past remains hidden. Wu Wing noticed her old schoolmate's smile and realized that this was part of his plan all along. "I will ensure she receives enough misinformation to keep her on the wrong path," Wu Wing said. "Thank you for giving me the chance to settle some scores with a few individuals I'd prefer not to have to answer to." The master bowed in respect and then left before she could respond. Wu Wing contemplated the gift she had just received. For years she had sought a way to confront those who had taken much of what she earned to fill their own pockets. Now, fate had provided her with an opportunity to use their rising star against them. Wu Wing believed that if everything went as planned, the Zen temple would receive its largest donation ever. The revelations began. I was preparing for the day when I noticed a new black four-door Ford Explorer driving up the hillside towards my home. It stood out for two reasons, the time of day and the model, which sparked concerns in my mind. The question I had to ask myself was whether they were friends or foes. I watched as the car parked and its occupants stepped out. The two gentlemen approaching my house appeared to have an official demeanor. Sensing possible danger, I braced myself for confrontation. The lack of advance warning heightened my suspicion. Both men were dressed in tailored suits reminiscent of those worn by presidential escorts. My unease increased as I noted that the younger of the two appeared of Oriental descent. I couldn't shake the thought that this might be a maneuver from the Chinese government if they intended to take me back. The older man walked swiftly, suggesting a sense of urgency or authority. It became clear to me that he was in charge, which meant I needed to keep a watchful eye on the younger man, who might be tasked with any covert actions. The older man seemed poised to handle the conversation, while the younger man might be used for any subtle tasks assigned. I resolved to remain cautious and prevent either from getting too close. I quickly donned my work clothes and headed downstairs to meet them when they knocked at the door. I left my shirt unbuttoned and went barefoot, ready to react if necessary. There was no way I would allow anyone to take me against my will. The coolness of the morning air was felt on my bare feet as I approached the front door. When they knocked, I opened it immediately. My first impression was that the two gentlemen were quite certain they had arrived at the right place. Both appeared comfortable, displaying a friendly demeanor that suggested they were here for information rather than for any other purpose. I breathed a sense of relief. "Dirk Blackstone, I presume," the older gentleman said. I replied with a yes. After introducing themselves, they pulled out their identification, which clearly showed them as being from the CIA. Immediately, that got my attention. I knew something was up. Then the older of the two spoke. "Dirk Blackstone, we were asked to come to talk to you directly," Chase Roberts said. "Terry Meadows, whom we understand you are familiar with, contacted me earlier this morning. We are here about a situation that happened last night where he is currently stationed because it appears to directly involve you." "What happened?" I asked with curiosity. "A man named Yong Ling was discovered in our embassy this morning," Chris Whitlock explained. "It created quite a stir because he was found sitting calmly in the middle of our security center as if he belonged there. Our security staff is still trying to figure out how he got past all the security measures we have in place." My first thought went back to the last day I had seen him. It was the first time I saw him use his skills to help us gain access to the embassy's locked outer security gates. I had been impressed by his ability to disable the flow of electricity to the building, forcing the security systems to reset. He had explained that it would take 30 seconds for the backup system to activate. I felt relieved to learn that he was still alive and capable. I knew that to gain access, he had to use some advanced skills he had chosen not to teach me when I was younger. My second thought was the realization that someone could be using his name. I needed to remain cautious until I received further confirmation that the person they were referring to was indeed who I hoped he was. "What has that got to do with me?" I asked, anticipating that what I was about to learn would be quite interesting. "Even in speaking in his native tongue, they have not learned much from him except for his constant request to be put in contact with you," Chase said. "It's frustrating our security staff because he would answer our questions in fluent English when we spoke to him in Chinese or would respond in Russian as if he were trying to confuse us. The security team believes he may be a Chinese agent. He claims that your life might be in danger." If only they knew, I thought. My adopted father, the master, if it was him, must have learned something important that he thinks I should be made aware of as soon as possible. I got a smile because I knew that only a man like him would be bold enough to be so direct and demanding. The reason we are here is that he has an accurate knowledge of your original name and kept referring to you as the Wooming. With your recent conversations, Terry thought I should talk to you directly to see what I could learn, Chase said. We are thinking that he is a spy sent in to find out what he can. Can you provide me with a current image of the man? I asked, while trying not to get my hopes up because the person could be anyone using my adopted father's name. It would be typical for the Chinese government to come up with something like this. With my history, I knew better than anyone it was best not to assume anything. Chase took out a BlackBerry from a jacket pocket and brought up the image that he had been sent. It was a picture of the master, my adopted father. From the picture, it appeared that he had not aged at all. He looked like he always did when he was wearing one of his ceremonial monk suits. A smile broke out on my face. My adopted father, the master, would only wear that particular outfit if he needed to convey a sense of diplomacy. Inform Terry Meadows that the man they are holding is definitely who he says he is. The youngling whom they are holding, for the record, is my adopted father. He was the one who brought me to the embassy when he believed that he could no longer protect me, I said. He is one of the Sacred Six and must have used secret teachings to gain entry to the embassy. Advise Terry that it would be wise on his part to take anything my adopted father says seriously and to treat him with great care, I added. Do not try to confuse him by talking in a different language in front of him. My adopted father speaks 7 of them fluently and may already know things that Terry might be trying to hide. It was interesting to see the shocked look as it came upon Chase's face. I clearly got the impression that they had believed they were in control of the situation. In fact, it was the other way around. My adopted father was and always would be 3 steps ahead of them. He is a master of Zen and a master of martial arts. If my adopted father believed that his life was in danger, the situation would be very different, I said. He does not support the government of China, but has learned to keep his life private, even with all the Chinese government's surveillance. He follows the teachings of Zen diligently. Why didn't he explain that? Chase asked aloud. Simply, he has no reason to trust those he is with, and had no reason to believe they would accept what he had to say, I explained. He lives in a world where even something innocent can be turned into a weapon against them. Until you have earned his trust because of the environment he lives in, he will keep most of his knowledge to himself. Chase walked away from us and made a phone call. I could hear him explaining my adopted father's relationship with me to the person on the other end. It gave Chris and me the chance to start getting to know each other. I learned that Chris was a 3rd-generation Chinese-American and knew very little about his forefathers' native country. About half an hour later, Chase returned with a smile on his face and handed his phone to me. Terry wants to talk to you. I took the phone and said, Dirk here. Hengao Xing Ting Dao Ni De Sheng Yin, Er Zi, the master responded, which means it is good to hear your voice, son. I must have looked touched because my eyes filled with emotion. Fu Gin Ni Ting Chi Lai Bu Kuo, I replied in Chinese, which means you sound well, father. Terry can be trusted. What's going on? I asked in Chinese. What has gotten you so concerned that you felt the need to contact me in this way? Using Latin, my adopted father told me in detail, without revealing any names, what he had experienced the previous day and what he had learned. Responding in the same language, I briefly summarized what had happened since reuniting with Suling and where it had led me. I ended up sharing that our suspicions about my birth father's death had been correct. To most, Latin was considered a dead language, and we knew it. From the first day I met him, he had started to teach it to me. Finally today, it all clicked. If the phone conversation was being recorded, they would spend weeks trying to decipher what language we were using. I could tell from the looks on Chase's and Chris's faces that they had no idea what I was saying. Latin, the root of many common languages, was known by very few. There was a pause in our conversation as my adopted father pondered what I had explained. Then he asked in English, What do you have? A file containing more than 60 pages of those being used in the USA by Gungwu Wang, their Chinese handler, I said in Latin, a language many believed was one of the original languages of our world. At that moment, my adopted father's voice took on a serious tone. Before ending our lengthy conversation, he mentioned that he was trying to arrange for the Sacred Six to come to America. In English, I asked, "What is the real reason you feel the need to do that?" His answer deeply surprised me, revealing just how much love, faith, belief, and trust he had in me. My adopted father, the master, replied with conviction, "Wo shuyao shi fang ni de tu unao," which means I need to free your mind. "I was the one you had second thoughts about," I replied in shock. "Why?" "The ging has always been strong in you," my father said in Chinese. "I observed how you handled the situation with resilience despite the challenges you faced. It was such an intrinsic part of you that it seemed to guard you from the distress you encountered. That was what drew me to you." When I shared my experiences with the Sacred Six, he continued, they engaged in a lengthy discussion and ultimately permitted me to impart the ancient teachings to you, provided I shielded your mind once you had mastered them. Given my youth, they were hesitant about me using such abilities until I could demonstrate my intention to cause no harm, I said. I understand their reasoning. The way you embraced the teachings and your rapid mastery amazed the other members of the Sacred Six. When they observed your innate talents firsthand, they were genuinely surprised, Yongling explained. Like me, they recognized that what you had learned was second nature to you. We all believe that by combining our skills, you can achieve even greater feats than we could together. "So why are all 6 of you coming?" I inquired. "All 6 of us may be necessary to unlock aspects of your mind that I have shielded over time," my adopted father replied. "During this process, some of their knowledge may also be shared with you. The extent of this transfer is uncertain, as it has never been attempted with someone who has been under such safeguards for an extended period. You think the challenges ahead might require those skills and teachings to be readily accessible," I noted. "Those you will be facing are capable of anything and possess the freedom to act without constraints," Wang Ling warned. "They do not adhere to societal rules. Be vigilant. When pressed, they can act unpredictably, much like a wild animal that has found an opportunity for escape. They will feel that failure could have dire consequences for themselves and their loved ones." "How soon can I expect you?" I asked. "As soon as we can finalize the details," my adopted father said. "The Chinese government lacks complete information. Until they understand more about the disappearance of one of their agents, we have time to prepare. Stay safe." "How can you be certain?" I pressed. "I influenced the thoughts of one of their emerging figures," he responded. "Her cell phone is en route out of the country via a smuggler's path to prison camps in North Korea. It will only reactivate once it reaches the heart of North Korea. By the time they trace it, she will be long gone. I will share more when I see you." For now, I should avoid sharing too much information, as there are too many listening ears, my adopted father concluded. Until she is found, the Chinese authorities will not make a move because they will believe that her disappearance may be connected to what she learned. After saying our goodbyes and ending the call, I went to hand the phone back to Chase Roberts. I knew the only thing stopping the Chinese government from coming after me was the uncertainty surrounding my situation. "Keep it. The secure line is yours until we are done with what is yet to come," Chase said as he handed me the cord to charge it. "I pre-programmed it with Terry's and my cell numbers so that we can stay connected. The agency thinks it might be beneficial for us to have you present when we take your grandfather into custody." "I would appreciate that opportunity," I said. "It would be nice to witness the reaction of my grandfather, whom I have never met, when I introduce myself. I believe the Chinese have not informed him that I escaped." "I hope the proof you have is secured," Chris said. "Multiple copies on computer sticks are stored in different locations in case one is discovered," I replied. "Who informed you about what I had?" "Terry Meadows and I graduated from CIA basic training together. We have known each other for years. He called me and had me catch a plane from Washington last night," Chase explained. "Chris, a local agent, picked me up. Once the situation is settled on this end, Terry will return to the States to be with me when we take you to headquarters while we clean up the situation." "Terry doesn't have the full picture," I said. "The digital file contains 4 pages of names who were turned by Gungwu Wang along with their history. It goes back to his younger years when he attended university here and formed relationships based on trust. The look on Chase Roberts' face spoke volumes. It was now very apparent that the situation was bigger than they imagined. This was a serious matter, and it would have to be handled very carefully. The last time the agency had addressed a spy ring this large was during the Cold War. That's why we had to pass through a security check before entering the valley, Chase said. We thought it was being set up as a gated community. It failed, I said. I should have been informed of who you were before you arrived. Changes will be necessary today to correct that oversight. That led me to explain what we were doing at the site. Everything from recycling the garbage, mining the iron ore, starting to reclaim the old gold mine, and cleaning up the ponds affecting the local ecosystem. Because it is still considered a construction site, we maintain security at the highest level, I said. Day visitors must sign in and out of a logbook, allowing us to monitor individuals who stand out. Staff are required to show their security badge when entering and leaving. It is scanned automatically into the computer. Before he left, Chase said, "You apparently do not believe in leaving things to chance. If you think of anything that could assist you, don't hesitate to ask." "Anyone you consider?" I said. "Look for the smallest detail in their past that could make you hesitant. If it raises a question in your mind, then it's best to be cautious because that could give others an advantage." Chris raised his eyebrow as if he were questioning my thought. I responded with, "Remember always that I have insights into their operations that you may not." "You sound like you are preparing for some serious challenges," Chris Whitlock said. "May I ask why?" "The Chinese have been known to coerce individuals who have relocated, bringing them back under their influence as it allows them to control the narrative," I explained. "They might publicly declare that the individual has renounced their new citizenship. With that statement circulated, they can manage the situation internally," I continued. "Once they achieve their objectives, the repatriated person could end up in conditions worse than expected." It was interesting to see the change on Chris Whitlock's face as he processed the information I had revealed. It was clear he had limited knowledge about how the Chinese government operates. There's an old saying, "Believe none of what you hear and half of what you see." My experiences had certainly made me a firm believer in that statement. "Chris, perhaps it would be best if Chase explains to you how long the Chinese government pursued me before I was brought out," I suggested. "It may help you understand that they do not relent easily." "One more thought to consider," I added. "Those in China who have revealed truths about significant events who have vanished, could they potentially be in captivity? Is there a way to investigate that possibility?" I watched them walk back to the vehicle they had arrived in. My mind was filled with thoughts of seeing my adopted father and the Sacred Six, whom I knew about but could not recall having met. It also made me wonder what might be hidden in the corners of my mind. I knew that if Chase and Chris explored the issues I had raised, there would be no doubt in their minds about the seriousness of our situation. Perhaps the proof they needed was already at the CIA headquarters. My adopted father's direct approach had served as a reminder. I went out through the side door into the vast, empty space behind the barn. For the next hour, I focused on honing my skills and movements. By the time I was done, I was covered in sweat and needed a shower. Realizing that I was behind on my regular schedule, I got moving quickly after finding a place to stash my newest lifeline for when I would need it. I texted Alana, writing, "Sorry I did not call you to say good morning. Had unexpected visitors show up. We'll explain everything when we talk tonight." From that day on, I returned to my martial arts training with new determination. I had kept up with the mental aspects but had been neglecting the physical. I knew that I needed to be at my best for when my adopted father, the master, would assess my skills to see how much I remembered. Over the next week, I became increasingly focused on getting my entire body back in shape, both mentally and physically. My physical workout went from an hour at the start to 2 hours by the end of the first week. I recognized that my adopted father would challenge me to ensure I remained disciplined and prepared. This brought a question to mind that I needed to discuss with Alana. With the freedoms we have in America, I wondered if society was becoming more accepting of things rather than recognizing the potential risks involved. It had been a month since I had spoken to my adopted father, who would be arriving with the other members of the Sacred Six at the end of the month. Cold weather was already settling in the area, and things felt too calm. I was expecting something to happen at any moment. I would meet them just after going to Olympia to meet with the governor and the EPA. It would be a time to discuss our progress and consider potential developments on the horizon. In preparation for what lay ahead, I had made a will leaving the bulk of my belongings to Alana or her parents, should anything happen to me, while also setting aside enough for Fen and Suling. I wanted to prevent any chance of my grandfather's family claiming my estate once my true parentage became public. A team of professionals had thoroughly examined the gold mine. We learned from them that with advances in technology, the amount of gold extraction would exceed what would typically be considered normal for a successful commercial operation. They had identified 10 major veins ready for development. As a precaution, I had sent the findings to the governor's office to inform him of the new opportunities emerging and indicated that we would handle the chemical processes in our recycling program moving forward. The detailed report was about 20 pages long. I left the final decision to him, stating that I did not require the additional revenue while highlighting that the taxes payable to the state would be significant when all were considered. Besides, we needed time to move our current location for the restoration office. It had taken a month, but we had just received the governor's written approval to proceed, as discussions with all parties concerned indicated no further issues regarding environmental pollution affecting the ecology of the water system. He believed the additional employment opportunities would be beneficial. The governor, in his wisdom, had been sharing our quarterly reports that clearly showed the potential risks had decreased considerably. He was being praised for his management of the situation by all involved, including those leading the environmental community. People were asking why similar efforts were not being implemented in other areas. Legal was now beginning the process of finding someone who would take over the gold mine on a partnership basis. Our goal was to ensure operations could commence without further costs to us, as we did not want to overextend our resources. David and I were on the east side of the valley, observing the west side of the large mountain currently being excavated by the mining company, which was using construction trailers as office space. We were assessing whether we had sufficient space to construct an office building that could be shared by the mining office staff and ourselves. We considered that if the mining company would be extracting gold for the next 10 years, they would likely want our existing building for their use. The main entrance to the mine was off to the right, in front of the security gate to our area. We began our evaluation from that point, using Alana's and my horses to inspect the surroundings thoroughly. The mountain loomed above us with several areas suitable for development. After taking rough measurements, we concluded there was ample space for an office building with 4 to 6 floors and adequate parking, provided we removed a small section of rock on our side of the security gate. This would enable us to construct a structure with windows on 3 sides, affording an open view of part of the valley below. The rock removal would also allow for a parking lot in the back. Further along, we would need to create a road leading to the first level, suitable for building a few homes. This could be accomplished using concrete, rock, and steel beams for reinforcement. The road would be wide enough to accommodate 3 lanes. We would also need to bring in fill to install sewage and water lines. We concluded that we could develop nearly 50 homes along the road to the initial flat area. All would have unrestricted views of the valley. On the first level, there was space for an additional 150 homes before we began working up to the higher levels. The material removed from the side of the mountain could be utilized in creating the road, thus reducing both time and expenses. Neither, when completed, would interfere with the air vents they had drilled into the rock to supply the mine with proper ventilation. David suggested that the homes on this side of the mountain should be primarily constructed from logs with a concrete block base, because it would complement the overall image of the valley. I readily agreed with him. "David, why did you think log homes would be perfect for this side of the mountain?" I asked. "I'm surprised you didn't see it," David said. "The south end of the mountain has a road from the highway winding through it, and it still has snow on it until late April. Once the village is established, it would be the perfect spot to develop some ski runs." I must have shown my surprise because David started laughing as he said, "My wife Debbie and I have been exploring that area in my spare time for quite a while. I can't take credit for the idea. It was actually my wife who suggested it." Best check with legal to ensure it's part of the property under our control, I said. If not, we should communicate with the governor to find a way to acquire it. It would be a big asset as we build our new community. During this time, I learned that David had secured the County Board of Education's agreement to build a 20-room mini-school with a multi-purpose gym to serve kindergarten through grade 12. To gain their agreement, we had to offer them a 200-year lease on the land at no cost and provide a donation of $100,000 toward its construction. David explained that the joint school would be designed with the gym center in the middle, the office out front, and 2 separate schools on the sides. One side accommodating grades kindergarten to 7, and the other for grades 8 to 12. They believed that with our public support for the new project, raising the funds needed would not pose a problem. Given our expected village population, they could promote the savings in transportation costs for local students attending classes elsewhere. The U.S. Postal Service has agreed to install a sub-postal station, which will include a few mail routes for the village. Once it's set up, we will receive a completely new zip code, David explained. As a result, land has been set aside for their building. Fred Myers has also agreed to rent the grocery store once it is constructed. What convinced them was the fact that this will be the only grocery store within a 2-hour drive. What about the subdivision in the main part of the village? I inquired. The roads are all laid out and water and sewage are now installed up to the lot lines, David said. The average village lot will be about 1/3 of an acre in size with lots being back-to-back. We now have 400 lots laid out ready for use. We will use asphalt on the village streets since the cost of oil is so cheap and have signed the contract for the whole project, David added. For now, we have crushed rock and sandstone to drive on until construction is completed. They will start paving when the warm weather comes. Are we going to be building them ourselves? I asked. Or have you thought about it? The commercial buildings in town we already are laying the foundation for, David said. We are going with concrete block made on site with sections of cut stone slabs attached to the outside. With the first 100 homes, we have sent out lot sizes, lease prices, county water, and sewage costs to see if there is any interest from builders in the area. If there is no interest, we will be doing it ourselves. It's a good thing we decided to put the main road into the village right in the center of the land we control, I said. That gives us room to grow commercially as the village progresses. Dirk, we need a name to call our village, David said. I want to start marketing it in some of the state's biggest papers. With the ability for many now to work at home, a lot are looking for ways to simplify their lives. This would give many the small-town life they are seeking. Tane, which means sky in Chinese, would be perfect since we are at the highest level in the area, I said. Everything near us is downhill from here. It's simple, memorable, and ties in with the area perfectly, David said. We could market it through the new company division called Hutfu, the real estate arm of our business. Who came up with that? I asked. Legal when they gave you the lease for your home and land, David explained. They realized that you plan to develop the area long-term. They typed in the name on a computer to find the Chinese word for restorative. Send out to all those home-building contractors that if they are interested in building here, their designs on the outside of their building should complement the surrounding area, I said, if you have to use images of Alana's and my home as a sample. The good news is that the way things are progressing, we will have completed the road around the valley by next spring, David said. That's when we will start developing the areas on this site for the residential homes. Inform the recycling crews that I want the area closest to the small park built up as fast as possible, I said. When you have a design for the new lots down on paper, I want first pick on 1 or 2 of the larger lots facing the valley. Why? David asked before adding, My wife and I plan to move here once the school is built. The long 2-hour drive home each night is exhausting. I have to build 2 homes for my future wives and my partners, I said. In the Chinese culture, it's my responsibility to make sure that all their lifelong needs are taken care of. What about Suling? David asked, aware of the dilemma I was in. My wife is South Korean and understands the situation you are facing. I had to ask her father for permission to get to know her before she would even acknowledge my interest. As a result, we both recognize the uniqueness of your circumstances. She feels that due to Suling's upbringing, There is a sense of loyalty to her family's traditions. I still have mixed feelings. Although both Alana and Suling support my desire for a lifelong relationship with them, they have expressed no issues with sharing that bond, I said. The connections I have developed with both women are significant. Today, if it were possible to marry both, I would without hesitation. They are wise, David noted, utilizing traditional values while putting a modern twist on them by coining a new term. If it were any other two individuals, I might question their intentions. What is your fundamental connection to them? The same conflict that often arises between a female and a male, I replied. I care for both of them for different reasons and in different ways. Are you still planning to convert the iron ore mine into a distillery? David asked, steering the conversation in another direction. As soon as they finish, I answered. The challenge is that they've realized the time needed for completion was underestimated. The concentration of iron ore is denser in some areas than anticipated, which has increased the volume of work. Thankfully, the remnants have provided a steady supply for the rock-crushing machine. When I first signed on to this project, I could never have envisioned your long-term goals materializing, David said honestly. Your vision has fostered so much growth and created numerous job opportunities in the area. What amazes everyone is how the flames manage to reduce unpleasant odors. The odor from decomposition is the gas we burn off, I explained. Using perforated pipes laid flat before piling on trash, rock, and soil allows the gas to escape, flowing into the metal pipes we use to incinerate it. If those flames were to go out, this place would become quite odorous until we could burn it off again. David paused, seemingly deep in thought, before saying, I never would have believed that what we do could actually save us money. Initially, I viewed it as a burden, but you've seen the savings in all our efforts. Recycling in general isn't a major profit maker. We were fortunate to receive a substantial monthly payment from the city of New York for managing their waste. It's provided us with a cushion to build upon, I clarified. I understood the long-term potential because of my vision for this area. We are further along than I thought we should be because we can use what is naturally here to aid us in the construction. I would not have believed that the trainloads of contaminated sheetrock we got could be used to provide us with the calcium we needed to make concrete, David said. That alone saved us thousands in costs. The sandstone we made saved us from hauling sand long distances. I was surprised when the lab report said that the concrete roads were more durable than what was on the state roads. If you factor in the man-hours, I said, needed to break it all down, our savings were really in the time and the transporting cost to have the concrete hauled in from elsewhere. We were putting up the horses after removing all the equipment off of them when a thought hit me. With the problems we were facing as a society, there would be many upper-class couples looking for a way to escape the challenges in the cities to an area that would provide them with a greater sense of security. David, when you have the plans for the new subdivision drawn up, I said, put a few feelers out to see if we can organize a deal for a major purchase from one of those prefab log home companies. It might be better if we secured a bulk deal done and some of them built before we start promoting the village. Log homes imply wealth, David pointed out. I see where your thinking is heading. Once the new office is built, I will make the new subdivision my top priority. Before doing that, be sure to work with financing because we need to be able to offer a significant down payment for it to work, I said. The style and size of log home we choose should complement the lot and space available. We will need to ensure that the landscaping will integrate well with the area. David looked at me with a puzzled look, so I added, prefab log homes are not cheap. The average for a 1,500-square-foot home is around $400,000. Those who work in the coating industry make good money and often work from home. They are a generation that wants to get out and enjoy outdoor activities like skiing, hiking, and hanging out in nature. They will be able to step outside their doors and see our eagles flying, David said. What a selling point. Be sure to promote the fact that once the village is established, we will have a heliport service to the nearest airport in Richmond, I said. The service Alana and I have used has already expressed interest in a setting that serves this need. That way, when the snow has blocked the roads, there is always a way for someone to get out in case of an emergency. What we're going to need is a doctor to run a small clinic. I started to laugh because I saw it as funny. It was as if we had come full circle. I had met my future wife Alana because of an accident. Now we were planning on establishing a regular service to get those needed to Richmond in less than 30 minutes. Alana and her family were surprised when they woke up Saturday morning. Although I had driven in as quietly as possible, the sound of my truck had woken them up. Alana watched as I brought my big black stallion out of the trailer and into the gate of the family's largest racetrack. She then saw me climb over the fence to join him. Once I was on the racetrack, my horse came up behind me, gently resting his head over my shoulder. The racetrack itself had a total circumference of 3/4 of a mile. I had planned to run around it 4 times. My black horse, whom I called Stormy, and I were on the Connor's largest racetrack, moving alongside each other in a playful game reminiscent of the tortoise and the hare. Stormy was ahead, but only just. It was a typical October morning with a cool temperature that felt refreshing. There were still traces of dew on the ground. I had parked my truck with the horse trailer by the gate to the track. I was wearing just a pair of blue jeans, and as we were on our second run around the track, Alana walked over to the fence to watch us. As we ran by her, Alana yelled, "Stormy's taunting you! You are sweating and your horse is not." "That just shows you how out of shape I am," I replied as I ran past. "Stormy is pacing himself to keep me company." "Out of shape? From where I'm standing, you look pretty good," Alana replied with laughter. As we started our 4th lap around the track, I picked up speed, prompting Stormy to respond in kind. We both raced toward the imaginary finish line, maintaining the pace as long as I could. In the end, my heart was pounding, I was short of breath, and my body was covered in sweat. I leaned over, trying to catch my breath. Stormy walked over and nuzzled my neck as if to invite me to continue playing our game. I knew it was his way of showing encouragement. Rubbing his nose as I stood back up, I assured him that we would do this again soon once the quarter-mile racetrack was built on the plateau. I needed to practice my running form, and Stormy needed to expend some of his energy. It did not take long for the cool morning breeze to dry my body. By the time Alana walked over, I was already back over the fence, starting to put on the rest of my clothing. "I wish I could run as fast as you," Alana said. "It would be such a thrill to do that with Toby." "I've slowed down," I replied. "I haven't done a run like that since I was in Scotland." I realized after talking to my adopted father that I need to be in top physical shape for the confrontation that's to come. "Mom and Dad will have started breakfast," Alana said. "Best come in and join us." "Let me put Stormy in the pasture," I said. "He's most likely worked up an appetite and can graze for something to eat." "You ran like it was the most important thing in the world," Alana said. "I personally did not think you would be able to complete the 3 miles. "I know I am not as fast as I used to be," I said. "My muscles will be reminding me about that all day. Based on the time, I averaged about 6 minutes a mile. When I left China, both my adopted father and I could do it in just over 4. I led Stormy over to the pasture, unbridled him, and let him join the others that had been left outside overnight before coming back to greet my future wife. After exchanging morning greetings, we walked hand in hand toward her parents' house. "Mom and Dad want to know if it's possible to have the Sacred Six over for a dinner while they are here," Alana said. "They have received clearance to attend," I said. "It's being billed as a cultural event. The feds have not disclosed their schedule and won't until they are in the air. The Chinese are sending a news team to cover them, so everything has to be managed very carefully." "Why will it have to be handled carefully?" Alana asked. "In China, the media is state-owned," I explained. "Those not in front of the camera are not what most would expect. Some of them will be Chinese agents working undercover. They could be assigned to manage espionage, counterintelligence, or other critical tasks." Alana stopped and turned to look at me. Looking into my eyes, she said, "Are you implying that just the fact that the Sacred Six are coming may have put their own lives in danger? With the Chinese government, anything is possible. My adopted father, the master, would have taken that possibility into account," I said. "He would have weighed it before making any decisions. I believe he would take any risk to protect someone he considers family." "Do you think your father will be pleased with the man you have become?" Alana asked. "My father will see the accomplishments in my life journey," I said, before drawing any conclusions. Then and only then in private will he share his thoughts. "I'm looking forward to meeting him," Alana said. "I expect I will find you're a lot like him in your approach and thinking. You always consider every possibility before making decisions." I have learned that you seem to make things easier when you do that. You're right, I replied as we approached the side door. Dave and I began to plan to develop the land the iron ore mine is in for housing. I will be setting aside 2 lots for the building of Fenn's and Suling's homes. Alana's eyes widened with excitement as she asked, Are you starting to come around to the idea that Suling and I are going to be sister wives? Knowing what she was hoping for, I replied, No final decision will be made until I have had a long talk with my adopted father. After all, it's a life-changing decision that cannot be taken lightly. A few minutes later, when we walked into the kitchen, Alana's face was aglow. Ian looked at his daughter and said, Someone received some good news this morning. I shared my plans about building a 1/4-mile track beside the barn next spring, I said. That way, Alana can return to competition with Toby, who she's been training with. When she realized her parents were not looking, Alana mouthed, Nice save. With her parents' permission, we unhitched the horse trailer and headed to pick up Fenn before visiting Suling. Alana, as usual, snuggled right up against me. I thought it important for the 4 of us to discuss a few things. Fenn was excited about helping at her father's restaurant and was looking forward to our arrival. As we were leaving, I took out an unsealed envelope and placed it into Ian's hands, saying privately, Please put this into your safe until it's needed. He noticed that what was written on the outside said last will and testament. You're more concerned than you show, Ian responded, holding it in his hand, wanting to join his wife in seeing us off. We both waved as we drove away. Ian turned to Bonnie and said, I'm pretty proud of those 2. With what Dirk is facing, it would have driven most couples apart. Yet it is drawing them closer than I could have ever imagined. Alana told me that they would face a situation that seemed insurmountable, Bonnie said. I had to ask for an explanation, but she said she couldn't because she didn't know what it was. I was worried until she described it as their Timshell moment. Timshell? I haven't heard that word since I was about 6 years old, Ian said. My mother's grandfather used to say it a lot. It's 18th century English, Bonnie explained. It is a biblical term that means, thou mayest overcome. On the way there, Alana shared a few details. At their senior high, a new teacher had transferred in along with several new students. Both Fenn and she had noticed that these students seemed older and more mature than most of their peers. What caught their attention was that they were all of Oriental descent. Both agreed that there was something unusual, as they had seen these new students observing others during lunch, almost as if they were searching for something. Does it seem like 1 or 2 of them stand out or attract attention? I asked. Funny that you should ask, Alana replied thoughtfully. Until you asked, I would not have seen it. 2 students seem to have developed a close relationship with the new computer science teacher. These same students are the ones that new students seem to gravitate toward at times, Alana explained. Sounds like you may have discovered a chain of command, I said. Try to learn if they are speaking Cantonese, Mandarin, or English with the teacher. A few minutes later, Bonnie brought Ian a cup of coffee into his home office, discovering him holding a legal document with tears in his eyes. What brought that on? Bonnie asked gently. Dirk asked me to put this in our safe, Ian explained. Curiosity got the better of me, so I had to take a look. It's his will and background information in case something happens to him. Bonnie, in shock, sat down in the chair, unsure of what to say, and simply looked at her husband, waiting. He's left most of it to our daughter or us if she should not survive him, Ian said, with provisions that will support Fenn and Suling for life. We knew he was doing well, but I had no idea how much he is worth. And I was worried about them as a couple taking on too much debt, Bonnie said. Dirk's parents must have left him a nice nest egg. Dirk was smart when he set up his restoration company, Ian said. He retained rights to the process they use and receives a monthly fee from the corporation for its usage. That alone is worth over $200,000 a year. The loans he secured from the state and federal government to set it all up were interest-free. Once the waste from New York City began to arrive, the corporation has been profitable and is now sitting on over $3 million in liquid assets, Ian said. From his parents' estate, he inherited $10 million from a trust his mother's grandparents had set up, which had been managed by a reputable investment firm. I know that Dirk does not spend excessively, yet has always paid his employees fairly, Bonnie noted. During our time knowing him, I have not heard of anyone quitting. Growing up, he lived very frugally. I learned from Alana that during his time in the temple, he slept on a simple bed. So many things we take for granted he views as luxuries. Our daughter told me that she had to show Dirk a few acquaintances' homes when they were designing their own to help him understand that what he considered overdoing it was actually the norm in our society, Ian said. That's when I realized that no matter what, they would manage just fine. Our daughter learned to be more mindful of her finances, and Dirk adapted to a new perspective. When they built their home, Bonnie said, I could not see the reasoning behind their choices. However, I fell in love with their home when we saw it completed. If there is paradise on earth, I think they have created it. The pond outside the side of their home and the landscaping that provides them with complete privacy. It takes a rare man to bring a vision to reality, Ian said. Watching the transformation of what was barren and wasted space into something that everyone associated with it finds pride in speaks volumes. From their home, we can see deer, elk, birds, and other wildlife returning to the area because of its improved environment. For years you were unhappy with what had been done, Bonnie said, to that area of land. I knew from that day we learned what Dirk was doing in the area that you were interested in his work. To be honest, Dirk intimidated me. I have never met anyone so focused and confident, Ian explained. To learn that he leads by example revealed the true nature of the man. I never thought I would meet someone who appreciated the beauty of creation as much as I do. If I had not given my word to Dirk, I believe Alana and he would be married by now. What? You need to share what he asked of you, Bonnie urged. Dirk asked me not to give them my blessing for an early wedding, Ian said, because he wanted to resolve the issues with his parents first. He didn't want Alana to face unnecessary hardships. With tears flowing freely and a shaky voice, Bonnie responded, Wow. Alana mentioned that Dirk considers the consequences of actions and plans accordingly. Based on what we've learned these last few months, I would have to say I agree with his perspective. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.